Welcome. Apologize for the delay. It was that pesky two-factor authentication that tripped us up in being able to start the meeting today. So, the joys of sharing a town-wide Zoom account. So we'll kick off the meeting. We have some guests today, but before we get to that, just wanted to go through a few of our kind of welcoming or opening agenda items. We have a new member today, Marie O'Reilly. So she is joining us, recently confirmed by the select board to join the housing committee. So I really appreciate you having an interest in housing and housing for our community here in Richmond. So thank you for participating and joining. Why don't we just take a quick moment? Do you want to just
Yeah, I'd
introduce
love to just
yourself
say
real quick?
hi. Yeah, I'm super excited to join this group, this committee. I think, attempting to sort of understand the housing landscape and improve it is so necessary in every community. And I'm glad to be starting right here in my own. I look forward to meeting with all of you and learning, sort of digging in and learning about what you've all been up to and how I can pitch in.
Great. Well, welcome.
Thank you.
Um, and then Connie, do you want to just introduce yourself? We can introduce
Yep.
the committee members, and we do have some guests here tonight as well. So we'll continue.
Alrighty. So welcome, Married. I'm not sure if I'm saying your name right. Want to give me like a tip on that?
Sure, you did pretty well. It rhymes with parade.
Oh, great. Oh, that's
Yeah,
great.
but
Married.
I'll never be upset if you mispronounce it. So,
Okay. Well, thank you for that. So I go by Connie and I live in Richmond on the north side of town near the Jericho border. I've been a resident here for over 30 years to three kids that grew up here and went to school here. And I work at the university in the College of Medicine. That's enough for me, I think. Andrew, do you want to go next?
Welcome, Mairead. My name's Andrew. I have lived in Richmond now for 8 years. I'm a realtor in the local market, landlord, investor, land developer, and also a local business owner with a contracting company. So I have my hands in quite a few parts of the housing and real estate industry.
Nick, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Nick Blanchette, live up on West White Hill in Richmond. Been a part of the community for a little over 4 years now. Have three young kids, and been a part of this committee for a little bit over a year.
Great. And those are the committee members that we have here in attendance this evening. As I mentioned, Virginia is wasn't able to make it tonight. And then we have Maya and Melanie from CCRPC who you want to just introduce yourselves real quick, but then we'll get to you a little bit later in the agenda here.
Sure. My name is Maya Balassa. I'm a planner at CCRPC, Chittenden County Regional Planning Commission, working on lots of different areas of planning, including housing. Melanie?
Yeah. Hi, everybody. I'm Melanie Needle. Previously was a senior planner at CCRPC for the first 20 years there, and now I have moved on to be the GIS and IT manager. So I'm here to support Maya and answer any questions that you might have about the Act 181 future land use mapping project that we're working on.
Thank you. All right, so just the first agenda item is looking at the well, I guess revisions to the agenda or any feedback on what we're talking about here tonight. We have Maya and Melanie talk about future land use and Act 181. And then we wanted to continue our discussion on the strategic housing plan. Just so we are aware, Maya and Melanie, how much time do you think your discussion might take tonight, or presentation might take tonight?
They can vary. I have a hard stop at 6:30 for another meeting, so yeah.
We will be done with that by then. Okay, perfect.
So
Great.
should we plan an hour including discussion, or Mark, I know there was Keith had told us in a previous message that we need to really be moving forward on the housing plan.
Yes. Yeah. So, well, I guess given our late start, it gives about 40 minutes until Maya needs to leave. So I think we'll stop by 6:30 at the latest, unless we are out of questions.
Thanks.
Will work, and then we'll lose the last 30 minutes from tonight for the strategic housing plan and updates there. Town plan items. Awesome. Okay. And then February 18th was the last time we met. The meeting minutes were posted. Anyone have any comments or adjustments from last month's meeting?
Nope.
Okay. We will approve those as is and move forward. All right, so first agenda item is really CCRPC coming and talking about future land use and Act 181 and our housing targets. So I'll turn it over to you two.
All right, thank you so much. I have a presentation that I can share to walk through, and then we can open it up for questions. So, all right. Act 181, housing targets and the regional planning. You may have been hearing some of this in other formats, so yeah, I'll just try and make it brief, but thorough. So the agenda, the purpose of Act 181, there's some interim Act 250 exemptions, permanent changes that regional future land use map has, housing targets that were associated with Act 181, permanent Act 250 exemptions, and then the state designation program are kind of all topics we'll touch upon tonight. So Act 181 was a land use law passed in 2023 that was a reform to Act 250. How are you guys familiar with Act 250? Or somewhat, yeah. I'm saying
Yes.
nod, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. So it was intended to kind of continue the state's land use vision to maintain Vermont's historic settlement pattern of compact villages and urban centers separated by countryside, focus on smart growth, and kind of align the state Act 250 and state designation program better, and kind of use RPCs to do this with the future regional land use map. So kind of intends to modernize the Vermont maps and how we direct public investments. And then also kind of in response to some feedback that Act 250 kind of creates this extra level of hardship in areas that we actually are planned for growth and want to see growth, to maybe make some options available to make it less arduous of a process. In areas planned for growth that have infrastructure and that have municipal zoning regulations in place that kind of do the same job, are duplicative. Act 181 kind of changed the process. It incorporated meaningful participation as defined in the environmental justice law, kind of added more purposes, including environmental justice, climate resilience, and housing in areas planned for growth. It created new elements that all 11 RPCs in the state need to use to map their areas, and then kind of specific descriptions of those elements, and we'll look at those in a minute. And then to kind of think about housing and reaching housing targets in these areas that are planned for growth. So we already have an existing future land use map for decades. It's kind of mimicked local zoning maps, and so mapping at the regional level at this higher level is not new, but it's just like kind of a new process and new elements and criteria. So the new categories that the Activity 1 laid out are downtown center, and they kind of on a scale from, you know, highest density multi-use to least. Downtown center, village center, planned growth area, village area, transition, enterprise, resource-based recreation, and then 4 rurals. So the downtown centers and the village centers largely kind of were taken from the existing designations. So Richmond has a village center that will just translate largely to the village center on this future regional land use map. Planned growth areas and village areas are the denser residential areas around the village centers. The distinction between those two is if there's water sewer infrastructure. So Richmond, the neighborhoods around there are planned growth area because they have infrastructure. Transition are these areas that there's been some kind of scoping and kind of an intention to do something different with, to have a transition in that area, but it's just not quite been done yet. But there's been some like investment and study in that. Enterprise areas are gravel pits and extraction areas and office parks that are not connected to village centers or planned growth areas, but that are represented on the map. Resource-based recreation, we have in Chittenden County in Cochrane Ski and Bolton. And then the rurals, there's 4 rural categories: hamlet, general, ag, forest, and conservation. The descriptions are pretty similar in statute. And we have some methodology on how to kind of, on a larger scale, kind of parse out the differences there. And how they kind of translate to state designation. So before, our land use map was approved by our board, and that was kind of the end of it. And now with Act 181, our land use map gets approved by the Land Use Review Board, which reviews Act 250 at the state level. And so when they approve all the RPC's maps, the areas that are mapped downtown and center will get automatically center designation in the state community investment designation. They're currently, that you guys already currently have in village center. Planned growth areas and village areas get automatically designated into neighborhood designation at the state designation community investment board. So that's how that kind of translates and is in trying to be in more alignment and less of a process. Right now you have to renew every 8 years. That renewal goes away because we renew our ecos plan every eight years. So that kind of keeps it out of hopefully an easier process. And then for Act 250, there was just one tier. There was just status quo everywhere, had the same kind of Act 250 review based on number of units and land and subdivisions. But now, in areas that the municipality has done work in, that has denser development, that has kind of this vision for more development, municipalities can opt in to Tier 1B, which is a partial exemption of Act 250 of 50 residential units or less. And the areas on our map that municipalities can opt in for any number of parcels or any area within that are the first pink 4. And that's kind of what we're looking for municipalities this summer is, are there any areas that you are comfortable with or interested in having Tier 1B partial exemption? Then those areas that have partial exemption, next after we get the Land Use Review Board approves our map 2026 or 7, municipalities can go to the LURB Land Use Review Board and seek Tier 1A, which is full exemption in those areas. Any questions on this?
So this does this essentially like replace other designations that we've had in the past, like the neighborhood the NDA and other, I forget the other name of the other one, but those kinds of things.
Yes. Those are kind of, this is yes, those go away in the sense that they're like translated into this approach, but the benefits of them and the mapped and the area is pretty much the same.
Okay. And who has the onus on determining determining what should receive the partial exemption and or full exemption in terms of the town? Is that a
Select board.
donor, or okay, so it's like the town says
Yes.
these pieces of parts of land we want to put into partial exemption.
Yes.
And you said 50 something, was it 50 plots, 50
residential units or less.
50 residential units? So if we have one building with 10 units in it, that counts as 10 of the 50 that we're talking about?
I think for a project. So if you had a,
Got
yes.
it. Got it. Okay.
Yes, good question.
So the town designates the area, and then the developer would apply for the exemption if their project was less than 50 units.
They wouldn't need to apply for the exemption if they built something that was, let's say, 15 units, where it usually would trigger Act 250. They just wouldn't have to go get an Act 250 permit.
Okay.
And that doesn't change anything about the local zoning and development review process. And so a lot of these municipalities are like, I think your height requirements in the village center are such
5.
that you couldn't go
I
up.
think 35 feet.
Right. And there's like, for like the lots that are in there, I think 50 units would be hard maybe to fit
Yes.
in a building there.
Hard's
So
an understatement.
Yes.
yeah, so I think there's some, like, this sounds kind of scary, like now there's no review for a giant building, but the project would still need to comply with local zoning. It's just that if there's a building of 11 units, it wouldn't need to kind of pay, $1,000 to get an Act 250 permit. If the local zoning reviews the things that the municipality is interested in there being oversight for. So, Burlington, South Burlington, Winooski, Essex Junction will probably are looking to take advantage of Tier 1B. And probably Tier 1A.
Is Tier 1A like more units, or how is that different than Tier 1? How is full exemption
Full
different?
exemption. So Tier 1B is like just for housing and just for 50. Tier 1A, if you apply for it from the LURB Land Use Review Board and if they approve it, no project in that whatever mapped area the municipality applies for within those top 3 boundaries need to get Act 250 review for anything. They just need to get local review.
Okay.
And also state, like, stormwater permits, like the state permits that are not Act 250 still need to be sought. It's just the I think 10 criteria in Act 250.
Okay, that's good. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, so I've kind of been referring to this process as I was speaking in the last slide, but just another visual of it. So the regional plan, regional planning commissions are creating these future land use maps all across the state right now. Then we will take them to the State Land Use Review Board for approval next year. And then the state designations kind of get automatically designated. And then there's these opportunities for Act 250 exemption. And so currently, while we're making these maps, the state wanted to kind of create some of this housing incentive in the interim, in the couple years in the interim. So there are current interim activities that are at play right now. So in Richmond, in the village center and a quarter-mile outside of it, 50 units or less are currently exempt from Act 250. So when that decision is made this summer by the select board, it will kind of be a continue as it has been for the last year, or remove that privilege. Because right now, if somebody built 12 units in the village center or a quarter-mile outside, they wouldn't have to get Act 250 review. So we kind of talked about what Tier 1A and Tier 1B are. Tier 2 is kind of a status quo. And then there is this Tier 3 being created at the state that is kind of a balancing act. You know, some places we allow less restrictive Act 250 review, and now in these other areas that are deemed to be kind of more critical natural resources, floodplains likely, will get this more strict Act 250 review, and that is still in the rulemaking process at the state. So we don't have a lot of information about what those maps will actually be. They're not, we have been told, based on our maps, because based on like the rural, how we have mapped the rural. Yeah. But that is forthcoming from the state. Also in Act 181 was a direction for regional planning commissions to disaggregate to their municipalities housing targets that were established by the Department of Housing and Community Development through the Housing Needs Assessment. And they found a number based on a bunch of different data, demographic, houses that are going off the market due to age, people wanting to like move to different sizes of housing, people moving here, a number of houses that need to be created. They distributed that to the regional planning commissions, and then we now are disaggregating that to our municipalities. We have a methodology for that. Those targets are coming out, are being publicly released Friday for a draft. And some points about the housing targets that I want to flag are that they are targets. They're not mandated numbers. They go out to 2050, 20 something 35. And because municipalities do not often build housing themselves, the way that we are kind of understanding the review of our municipalities are in compliance is if they put these numbers in their town plan, and if they are creating a conditions in their municipality with which these housing targets could be met by the market. So it's not, did you build this much housing? It's, you know, do you have like dimensional standards and height standards and lot size standard and all, like kind of zoning regulations that permit housing. The Planning Advisory Committee guided the approach to how to disaggregate these targets. 60% of the number that we got is going to our urban communities. So Burlington, South Burlington, Winooski, Williston, and Essex Junction, I think. Maybe not Williston. Yeah. So this is the draft regional future land use map for Richmond. The dark, you can't really tell at this level. I can zoom in a moment, but the village center And the dark pink, kind of under the word Richmond, is the village center. It's your current village center. And then the planned growth area, I think kind of mirrors your village residential south, village residential north zoning districts that were added this year, maybe late last year, I forget. Yeah, and then I think the rurals are very eye-catching. But I do want to just flag in our discussion of them that they don't have, they're pretty similar in description. And so usually their regional future land use map, when we review town plans, we make sure that your regional future land use map is kind of in alignment, I think is the term, with the regional planning commissions. And since that's kind of the only way the rural categories will be utilized, and because the descriptions are all pretty similar, we're aiming to be in alignment with you guys for these. And so this is whether something is designated is based on a methodology that I think Melanie is better suited to answer, but yeah, so just flagging that. And then I wanted to post your guys' zoning map, just if we in discussion for referencing areas that need to be flagged. Okay, questions and discussion, and then I can pull up the map on the browser, which has a comment tool. So after this meeting, you're also welcome to please go on there and kind of zoom in any areas you want to, and add comments for us to consider later. So do you have any questions or comments on this page before I can stop sharing if you want to have it discussion without the visual?
No, I think it's helpful. So the map here, future land use map, this is just to maybe recap what you had mentioned. This is mostly mirroring what we currently have for our town maps, or at least the ag, rural, the greens out there is mostly mirroring that. But that CCRPC is trying to designate more around our village centers, the transitional infill areas, to apply this these new categories. Is kind of what you're saying.
Yes.
They're applying these new categories to what we have existing in Richmond, and you're looking for comments and feedback on, like, does that seem right? Is that what you're?
Yeah. Yes. Yeah, I think a lot of this is not, there's been some like, we're not saying where to build. We're trying to understand if what we are representing is what you guys do intend, where you do intend to have your residential, more dense residential around your center. What areas are you guys thinking about, in the future, that transition, there's that orange transition area, like, is that an area that you guys have been thinking that, like, could be something different than what it is today, or could have wastewater, or could have more development, or different development, things like that.
And most immediately, the implications of how this map gets determined is potentially around what could get exempt or partially exempt based on the Act 250 designations, and being a village center, downtown center, village area, etc.
Yeah. Yes.
Right.
Yeah. So yeah, the largest implication is definitely those pink categories of, like, and less so if something is categorized as planned growth area, but you want to exclude it from tier 1B, then there's not really nothing really happens to that, except for it's available to have to like utilize tax or like not tax to like state. I haven't memorized all the specific state designation benefits, but there's like historic tax credits you can get, it could utilize that. So it's a benefit in terms of it's just solely a benefit in terms of the state designation program. And then in terms of tier 1B, you could withdraw it from that boundary, or the municipality could withdraw it from that boundary, or so that's how, I don't know if that's helpful, but.
Any other questions on that? Yes.
So in terms of tier, oh, sorry, I can't see anyone else.
My name's Connie, and I thank you for the presentation. Is there a next step from your perspective other than the town's plan needs to include these things, which is what the expectation is?
Yeah, then the thing that I'm most curious about is if Richmond is interested in tier 1B and continuing tier 1B. So that's a select board decision, but I think, yeah, all the input and is helpful.
I mean, I think from my standpoint, yes, in those areas that we want to designate to fall into those land use areas that would qualify for tier 1B exemption, right? And I think that would is one more chink to why we're here as an organization, is to talk about like how do we create more affordable options for folks that want to live here in Richmond, right? And I feel like that's obviously in line with some of the things we talked about, as well as some of that concentration around the village areas and the plan growth areas and out the corridor to the highway, et cetera.
How fixed are these maps? Is it like we're gonna set these maps and they're here for 40 years, for 10 years, for 2 years? Is there any set like review period where it's baked in to kind of have a reanalysis of where and what progress has been made?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, currently this map is draft for us. So through May 19th, we're taking comments on the website. And then once we have it approved, we update our ECOS plan every 8 years. So this will be looked at every 8 years. And then if there are important changes that need to be made in the interim, we also can make amendments. I think we'll want to clump those because it's kind of it's a longer process. So since this is our first time doing this with this new format, we will likely need to do some level of adjustments within, the year or two following it. But at minimum every 8 years, this will be rehashed.
And outside, kind of piggybacking on that, has there been any consideration to maybe utilizing these maps to encourage municipalities to perhaps expand, or is it really just a reflection of where we were before and putting different labels and colors on things? I mean, hypothetically, let's say, because this is a topic of conversation that we've had, is about expansion of any community's water and sewer system. Has there been any consideration to broaden some of these maps and options to encourage local water districts and or private developers and public developers to expand where these places could have growth centers if the local select board buys in?
Yeah, I think it's definitely a balance. We want to make sure we're reflecting what the municipality is kind of initiating for where they want those boundaries to grow. And I think the housing targets are largely intended to be a conversation starter because they're all going to be, the numbers are all going to be high. I think they're going to feel high to municipalities. And so that hopefully starts a lot of conversations about, okay, if we were to have to incorporate this many units, where would we want that to be, considering that smart growth is kind of a state goal. And if they were to be in our downtowns and in our or our centers or our village centers or our, this one area, would wastewater be an important thing to have? So, yeah, kind of a lot of vision for the municipalities to be the initiators of that, but the housing targets are meant to be a conversation starter for some of those housing conversations.
Yeah, and I would say, like, I'm not trying to take over anything, so if somebody can shut me down at any time. The cost of the, like, for municipalities, the concept of growth is costly. So just sometimes incentive to meet those targets could potentially be beneficial, would be some just general feedback. And I've seen recent things in the Northeast Kingdom that seem to be trending in that direction. Um, because for us here in Richmond, I've heard rumors of the numbers that we'll see from these housing targets that are, I'd love to develop homes. That's what I do for a living, but it's just not in our geographical area with floodplains and railroads and mountains. It's not very feasible without some sort of change in our infrastructure that we
Yeah,
can't afford.
that's a great point. I'm writing everything down, so I will catalog that. Thank you.
You had mentioned earlier that there were two criteria to be in compliance with the housing targets that are to come. One is in your town plan, and then you mentioned creating conditions to meet these targets. Are there going to be recommendations or thoughts, either specific to Richmond or in general, as to what those conditions are that you would look at to say, hey, yes, you've started meeting these targets?
That is a good question. I don't know the answer to that. The when that we are going to ask that question is when for regional plan for town plan review at the regional level. We regionally approve every municipality's town plan. And so for us to check one of the boxes for is your planning conformance will be, are you working towards, have you created the conditions for the housing targets? I have not heard somebody speak about like how we're gonna review that or what guidance we can give towns to let them know what it would take to meet that. That's a really great question, and I will definitely bring that up.
Okay. Yeah, because we're in the town planning process right now, right? So we're looking at
Yeah.
those that are related to housing, right? In terms of this committee,
Yeah.
what we want to include in the town plan. So I think that guidance would be helpful to help determine what do we want to put in the town plan, and not necessarily wait for when we submit it to the Regional Planning Commission for approval to say, oh yeah, well, you should have put this in there.
Yeah. I think because you're just getting the housing target while you're doing this town plan update, we're not going to be, have you done the work already in the past 6 months? So it might, but I think that's a good question, and guidance would be a great thing. So I will review that and get back to you.
And I guess, and if someone else has questions, feel free to chime in. You can ask him all. Okay. With the Act 181, were there other suggestions as part of this as to how our zoning needed to be updated? Our zoning needs to be updated in order to be in compliance with Act 181.
I can chime in for a second.
Yeah, please.
Act 181 is not saying that a municipality needs to update their zoning to be in compliance with it. The compliance piece comes in when CCRPC is reviewing your town plan for compliance, and we will look at how the future land use map in the town plan comports with the future land use map at the region. And I believe that we're still kind of working this out. Because the compliance piece needs to make sure that the regional future land use map is not contradicting the town future land use map. So, and then the town future land use map is sort of the next step for zoning. So it's kind of a sequential process. So we have the future land use map set, and then obviously the timing doesn't always work. But so the compliance piece is that the town future land use map needs to be in alignment with the regional future land use map. So it's sort of apples to apples comparison. So future land use map to future land use map. And then your zoning is an articulation of what is in that town future land use map. Does that help to answer your question?
I think so. Yes. I mean, it sounds like it's, kind of a needing to meet in the middle here, right? And maybe it's a little bit hard, the chicken or the egg, right?
Yeah, and I mean the goal is for the town future land use map to be in compliance with the regional future land use map. Like I think Richmond, you guys did your future land use map in like 2017, 2018, I believe. So it would probably through your town plan process be I guess a good idea to, take a look at that and see how it compares with the draft future land use map that we're working towards now. Does that
Okay.
help? Okay.
Yeah, no, I think that does.
Yeah, and I mean, honestly, it's Act 181 is new, and so we're all going through this together and figuring out how it's going to work. But I mean, statute says that the regional plan and the town plan future land use maps need to be in alignment.
One more question I had, but I forgot what it was, but someone else can.
I'm just gonna say, following this, I would encourage you all to go to CCRPC Ecos Engagement, and there's a link to the map viewer that you could comment on like each parcels. And so if you want to spend more time like with this map, this is a draft version. If there's parcels you think we have mapped incorrectly and you identified a better category for, or just want to flag it for us, that would be great. And we
I
can.
just put the link in the chat,
Thank you, Melanie.
which explains the background of all of this. I highly recommend reading all the context, and Maya did a fantabulous job of explaining it, but there's a lot of pieces to this. So read the engagement piece, and then here is a link to the map as well. I'm putting that in the chat as well.
And is this something you're looking from who are you looking for the comments from on the map? Like, are we looking?
This is public, so anyone, everyone.
Okay.
Yeah, we recently, on Friday, we sent out a press release and it went out on Front Porch Forum. And so, there's definitely the general public has been commenting, and you can see the comments that have been submitted to date. So far, there aren't any comments in Richmond, so maybe you guys will be the first ones.
Okay, great.
And if you have any follow-up questions from this, please feel free to email me.
Right.
Could
Thank
you
you
put
so
your
much for letting me go through.
Maya, could you put your email address into the chat?
Yeah.
Perfect.
Thank you for letting me
That's wonderful.
go through my presentation and for giving me some thoughtful questions and feedback, and yeah, stay in contact.
Okay.
Thanks so
really
much.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time tonight.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye, thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Any other thoughts, questions on that?
I
Very
found it
helpful.
informative. I don't know exactly what to do with the information, but it was interesting and helpful.
I mean, I think what the thought process is, oh, hey, Virginia, is
Hey.
that those, you know, if we're looking for ways to encourage development in certain areas, right? Act 250 can be a big hurdle for developers that today might that might hit that threshold, right? And so I guess my takeaway from it is in those areas that are part of that partial exemption tier, um, uh, those would be areas where we want to like concentrate or have opportunities for potential development projects, right? So aligning with where do we see growth possible with those village centers, which I think we're probably already pretty much in alignment with our future land use map and the one that they have at the regional level. But Virginia, I don't know if you have any comments on that one.
Can you hear me?
We can, yes.
Okay, so I'm on a train and the internet cable connection is very unstable. So I may cut out at any minute. And there's a lot of background noise as well. But anyway, it seems to be working with my personal hotspot on my phone. So all this information has been presented to the Planning Commission, obviously. And the creation of these future land use maps that she was talking about, the regional one and the town one, is kind of an iterative process. You know, they have come to the Planning Commission and said, what is your idea of a future land use map? Here's our idea, and do you want to change it? And, you know, so it's supposed to be collaborative. Like ours doesn't have to agree with theirs exactly. Theirs doesn't have to agree with ours exactly, but we have to come to some meeting in the middle of what this map wants to look like. So, you know, they wanted to have in their transitional zone, the gateway area, the area of the mobile home park. That seems good, that's fine. Do we want to include them in this Tier 1B question? So the Tier 1B issue is, are we fine with thinking that we can do an adequate job in reviewing these projects? So we have already had an exemption for projects that are less than 10 units. That was the way the exemption worked before. So this is why people build 9-unit projects, so that they can not have the Act 250 review. So this Tier 1B would increase that up to from 10 to 50. So the question that the Planning Commission has been talking about is are we capable of doing that? You know, do we have the staff and the expertise, and are we comfortable enough with the 50 units? What would be interesting is, since there's an interim period when we are Tier 1B. You know, she said, in the meantime, until this is all formalized and the Land Use Review Board, which is all new and is starting to set up its own regulations and so forth, until that's all formalized, we have this interim period of up to 50 units don't need Act 250 review. So, I mean, it would be kind of interesting to see how it works. And we've got the Jolena Court project, the Creamery, which we just have finally sent the proposed zoning to the select board. We'll see what they say. If, you know, if they decide to put that in, that building 2 in the interim period, then they will not have to go through Act 250 review, which of course they were not looking forward to anyway. So, you know, that's the question that the Planning Commission is talking about right now, is do we think we want Tier 1B? So if the Housing Committee thinks that it's a good idea, you know, I mean, Keith thinks it's a good idea not to have those people go through Act 250, and he thinks there's an adequate amount of review on staff. Like, we're somewhere in between the big towns who obviously have enough review of Act 250 criteria to be Tier 1A. Well, we're definitely not going to be Tier 1A. We don't want to say that there are no projects. Maybe, I mean, you know, the Housing Committee should have its own opinion as to whether to encourage the Planning Commission to go for Tier 1B status. The Planning Commission is like, we don't, you know, we haven't really decided if we think we're comfortable doing that or not. So, yeah, so that would be something that the Housing Committee could do, is they could say, well, we think you might as well go for Tier 1B status. That seems like a good thing. Let's exempt these projects up to 50 units, and there's still, you know, as you all pointed out, there's still the problem that they have to abide by the town zoning, and if we have this height limitation, then it's going to be hard. We have put in the expanded density allowances, you know, for the districts in the village residential commercial, and the village neighborhoods have the 5 units per acre as a density allowance, and the ability to put in 3 to 4 unit family buildings. And we also have, if it is an affordable housing development, meaning that 20% or at least 5 units are affordable, those developments immediately get to have an additional height. So our height restriction of 35 goes to an additional height if somebody wants to invest in an affordable housing development as defined in statute. So yeah, and as far as the map goes, in terms of the village area, so we have the village, the core village density, including the north and south residential areas. We haven't done anything yet with the high density residential. You know, we haven't gotten around to really thinking about that. The places they put as transitional were the gateway, because it's always been kind of in that category of transitional. The area of the rest of the mobile home park parcel that is undeveloped, I mean, that should definitely be transitional, because we should be working towards that. And then is there any other areas that we want to make transitional? You know, do we want to make like the Far Farm transitional? That's a question that we haven't really come to any decision about. But that would be something that maybe the Housing Committee could weigh in on.
But
So,
Virginia, just a question on that. The
yeah,
areas designated as transitional, according to that little chart that Maya had,
yeah,
my understanding, those could not be partially exempt. They don't qualify for Tier 1B. So if we wanted the gateway to be,
well, unless you put them in it, you could put them in it.
well,
You
the
could
little
put those
chart
areas into Tier 1B. Oh,
Yeah, she
sorry,
said
I
the
have to
4 on
talk
the
more quietly.
left. The 4 colors on the left were part of that group of exemption, and the 4 on the right were not, is how I understood it, Mark.
Yeah, right. So the transitional was not.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
I mean, I think if you, from my perspective, my sole opinion is it sucks that the state doesn't have a middle tier, like 25 units or 22 units or 20, but they don't. So we kind of just have to deal with that. We can give them feedback that it's not a circle and a square, but it is what it is. I think just from a, if I put my cap on from a land developer and investor, there, if the town bylaws and zoning regs encourage housing, but don't stretch themselves where you end up with a 65-foot high rise, which none of us probably want. I think it's kind of like a perfect storm from a long-term and mid-term perspective to buy into the tier 1A exemption. Because it shows people that that Richmond's open for business, willing to hear, and if we don't bend to zoning variances that are requested over and over and just stick to whatever parameters make sense for the downtown corridor, even though 50 is not going to happen based on any parcel that you look on that map, maybe 17 could on 2 or 3 combined parcels over time. So I think my personal opinion is, and professional opinion is, that the risk profile to Richmond isn't high from somebody's going to come in and build 49 units here and 49 here. It doesn't seem feasible if we really look at the pragmatic logistics, especially if they have to fit inside town zoning. So you just structure your zoning to be open but not allow untapped growth.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, I would align with wanting to apply for the partial exemption, the tier 1B exemption for the areas that qualify. I guess my only concern is if we label the gateway as transitional, would we have to reclassify that as one of the other planned growth areas or village areas?
Yeah, but the issue over there is there's no public sewer and water. So they're going to have to go through Vermont wastewater permitting processes. It's a floodplain. There's going to be nowhere that a community septic can support mass scale housing. So that's where just putting on like the pragmatic approach to it, the gateway, you would have to have sewer and water there to be able to develop it. So if it's, that's what I was leading to with that question with her. If you paint this area as open for business, sooner or later, somebody's going to be like, hey, my God, look at this opportunity. We can create what Richmond wants, and it's a win-win. So it's like just putting that carrot out there for somebody to grab, because as it stands now, there's no way that somebody could put it. It's just not a pragmatic. The state would never approve a wastewater permit for a community septic there. It just can't happen because you still have to check those boxes with wastewater permitting and local zoning.
Well, but the village area does not have water sewer already. So we could label, unless there's other criteria, we could label the gateway as being a village area.
Wouldn't you mean
If
that the
you
village
did.
area does not have water sewer? Wait, Mark, could you say that again? I didn't get it.
Yeah.
How she explained it, there was the downtown center, the village center, the planned growth area all currently have access to water sewer. The village area still falls under the tier 1B, but does not necessarily currently have water sewer, right? Which is the gateway.
So you mean the transitional area? You said village, but you mean
Right.
Gateway's
transitional.
transitional, right? Yeah.
It's transitional today, but transitional doesn't qualify for tier 1B.
Got it. I agree with
Does that
him.
make sense? I think. Okay. Well, I think some of those recommendations should probably go into our strategic plan here, right? Like what are we, and the town plan that we're putting together, right? What are we recommending as a committee?
So is the town plan our place to provide the support that Virginia was talking about? I mean, she made a request in a sense for the housing committee talk about and potentially support. tier 1B status exemptions for some of the designated areas in Richmond. And to do that, if we chose to do that, would that go into our component of the town plan, or is that a different mechanism or step that we would take?
I think we'll have to tie off with her specifically, but we have two plans we're working on, right? We're working on those items that are going in the town plan, and then we have the strategic housing plan. So those in essence should probably be aligned anyways. Right. And I think that would be the place where we recommend. Now, whether Virginia wants us to send in this like a special letter to the select board to say, hey, this is our position, I guess we'll have to hear from her on that.
In her absence, let's just work on what we know, which is certainly in the strategic housing plan, but as well are part of the town plan to the degree that it makes sense to Keith and Virginia.
Yeah. Okay.
Mairead, you've been listening so well and thoughtfully. Do you have questions? I mean, this is like your first meeting and it's like
first
a barrage.
Just trying to wrap my head around a lot of it. I did go through some of the documents that the presenter went through earlier to sort of give myself a primer, but I'm just, I am feeling like there's some gaps in my knowledge. For example, one of the things that Virginia mentioned is the Planning Commission was sort of grappling with whether they have the capacity to actually do a sufficient review if the sort of Act 250 review is not happening. And I don't know enough about who actually, what role the Planning Commission does in reviewing all those and which bodies in the town are responsible for doing all of that review. And I think I'm scrambling and looking at the town website to sort of try and piece that together and at least start to formulate some thoughts on like, I mean, I think that's a really important question. Like, are there, humans with time who can really thoughtfully engage? I mean, I definitely come at this with the having more accessible housing in this town would be amazing. But I also, it sort of struck me when she said that like, okay, who is responsible for all of that review? And like, I can imagine that being a lot of work and potentially daunting, but if anyone has a Cliff Notes, or I was trying to find charts on the website, but
I'll say I don't know all the answers, so I don't feel left out on that. I think Keith, who's not here tonight, is our town planner, right? So I think he would play a big role in any project that comes through the team, and he's a team of one right now, right? So and you heard that Virginia's working on the Creamery project, right? And that's been a big discussion for the past number of years, but as of recent, they're looking to start with phase 2 of their project.
Yeah, I did look into that project a little bit and finally understood that that's what the new build in town, that's the part 1 of that. And and that it's sort of been stalled due to zoning, sort of like in the permitting zoning approval process, right?
I mean, I think it's been maybe not stalled, but it's been stalled for a number of reasons, right? I think they did phase 1 and then they're coming back to get approval for phase 2. And yes, there's a lot of discussion going back as to the original plans are now changing based on economic conditions and less commercial, more residential, because no one's wanting commercial right now. Everyone's wanting residential, but previously had been approved with like meeting some commercial requirements and things like that. So kind of where they're at.
Yeah.
So all right. Well, I know we have about 15 minutes left. I did wanted to share my screen real quick here. So, and I can share out our town folder as well, which has a lot of documents in it for the housing committee. right? And I think that'd be really helpful for you to come up to speed as well. But we've been working on this document. It's called, it's kind of a strategic housing plan here. Basically, essentially a recommendation to the town, to the planning commission / select board, as to like what are some things that we recommend as a housing committee. And so one of the sections that we kind of has been updated since last time we met was around the development of community support and outreach. So I had shared this with Connie the other day. She's been primarily working on this, but there's an updated section here. And so I'm not going to go through that here tonight, but I think the ask for the committee is to also read through the section and provide any comments on it as well. Connie, anything you want to add there? This was kind of your section as well.
No, that was perfect, except thank you to Mark for turning my sort of very terse outline into some really readable language. So thanks for spending the time to do that. It looks good to me.
And so, I think from where we are today, I think the water and sewer section is pretty good at the moment. Andrew, anything major you think needs to get changed here? Or are you good with this section? You're on mute.
How recently has it changed? Last I looked, it looked good.
Yeah, it hasn't changed since I haven't changed anything.
Yeah, we're just, yeah, I thought it was,
Okay.
you did a good job of cleaning up.
All right, so we have then this section here. I do have some yellows that I'll probably follow up with Keith on to try and get some metrics that I just highlighted here. And then we have the community outreach and support. So I think the last section, I'm sorry, I'm just zipping through this so quickly, is around zoning and zoning recommendations. I know Virginia's not here tonight, but I think that's the last section that we had at least outlined, I believe.
This year, Nick, he's on this one.
Yes.
Nick, do you have anything to add?
No, I don't think I had anything to add to the zoning part. I wasn't able to catch up with Virginia before this, but
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, so I think just working with Nick and Virginia on cleaning up this section and kind of ironing out some of our recommendations for that. So Marie, I think welcome any suggestions that you have throughout the whole document. And then others just looking at the community outreach section would be great. All right, so that's I think where we are with strategic plan. And then we had also just for some quick context here, there's the town plan, which is like this 100+ page document that we have to refresh every year, every 8 years. It's now time to refresh ours. We had gone through a process of pulling out all of the things from the old 2018 plan that are relevant, commenting on them. And then last meeting, we had spent some time putting together, okay, what ones do we think we want to include in our upcoming town plan? So I had put some comments in here from last month, and I had done a little bit of cleanup. But I think the second piece from takeaways from tonight is if folks could go through the items we have here and either comment on them, you can add like another comment here, or add to them or adjust, right? And anything that's crossed out, we said, I think last time, we can just get rid of that. We don't need that. So if that could be a takeaway as well. Obviously we had a discussion tonight about some things that might need to get added to this around what those housing targets are. So when we find out what those housing targets are, we can add to this. Cool. So I think those were the items that I had for tonight. Anything else? Or any questions on that?
Well, what should our agenda be for next time, and is there any homework?
Well, I think the two homework pieces are to review these two documents and add comments. So if you want to add comments like this, kind of add an actual comment, or you can turn on track changes. I don't think it's on in these documents, and just make some changes, so that we're aware. I think those will be the two homework assignments.
And Mark, is there a way that you could add some for me? And I mean, I'm happy to just go through the folder you send me and
Yeah,
read, but if there's some sort of, particularly important documents that you think I really just need to be reviewing besides these, I'd welcome that.
yes. I'm happy to do that. I think, like I said, I'll share the folder. It's been a really busy week work-wise for me, so I would have said some of that earlier. But this is what our folder looks like, and I've tried to put some of the things together in like folders, right? Let's see, folders for, but I can call out some of those items.
Yeah, and no worries. I'm happy to just sort of dig through it if it's all, stuff I can look through, but.
Next meeting, what? Yes.
April 23rd.
What do we want to talk about next meeting?
First of all, is everybody going to be able to make it? It's Wednesday, the 23rd at 5:30.
Yes, I can after the April. I don't know what my calendar will look like for May, June, July. I'm a very, very active youth soccer and youth baseball coach this spring, it looks like. So I don't know what my
Yeah.
calendar will look like until they set that schedule for when we get field access. But April break, there's no practice, so I'm good.
Oh, it is during a break. Okay. Yeah. I mean, we're not going anywhere, so.
Yeah, that is a break week there for the next meeting.
Okay.
Nick, does that work for you too?
Yep, I'll be on break with the kids, but I'll be around.
Okay, and Marie, it works for you?
It does, yes.
Wonderful. Okay, then we're good for next meeting. Agenda, you were talking, Mark, and I interrupted you.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of it's just continuing with the town plan work. So maybe we can review the comments that we have from the town plan and the strategic document. I'd love to get and Nick, we could connect offline as well. Just the that last section. Maybe Nick and Virginia, we can connect and just get that last section kind of organized.
Yep. We can take a look.
Okay, so that'll be our focus. Okay, I think that's appropriate.
Great. Any other business? Okay, I think we're good. Well, appreciate the time tonight. Sorry for the late start, but generally Keith's here to start the meeting for us, and we just weren't expecting that two-factor authentication to pop up. So
Yep. We'll figure it out for
We
next
love
time
Keith.
if we need to.
yeah.
All
Okay.
right, thank you guys. See ya.
All right.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.